So Mo Hassan has a very impressive list that I'm going to read off to you here. So he's a modern day Renaissance man. He's a social entrepreneur, award-winning trainer, speaker. He's the author of The Truth About SharePoint, Essentials for Executives and Managers, and Retirement Planning for Federal Employees. You're a TV host, he's a chef, ballroom dancer, futurist, technologist, and philanthropist. On top of that, he's also the founder and president of Intupower, a corporate training and management consulting firm, and the co-founder of Earthopia, a nonprofit organization working to provide world-class education and abundance of real food for children globally. So welcome to the show, Mo.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you so much for having me on. It's an honor.
And just before we get started today, just want to remind everybody, I'd love to invite you to come over to my Author to Authority Facebook group, where you can watch all the videos from the podcast. And we also do a lot of fun wordplay on there. Plus, we do teaching and training on how to write books and then use those books to position yourself as the authority in your niche. So type in Author to Authority on Facebook and come join the group. So Mo, I know that you have some really amazing teaching today on wealth and freedom. But just before we get into that, I'd really love to have you introduce ourselves to the listeners and tell them a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thank you so much. So again, my name is Mo, and I'm kind of, in some ways, not that extraordinary. I didn't go to an Ivy League school. In fact, I didn't go to college at all. In fact, I technically failed the 11th grade in high school because I skipped so much school for truancy reasons. And I was like long past, like way more days than I was allowed for you to skip school. And then what I discovered is that the school board is happy to make exceptions. And what I also discovered along the way is that a college degree didn't necessarily mean I couldn't get the jobs that I wanted to do. And so over the years, what I've been doing is I've actually been training executives and managers for now over 20 years. And it was fascinating. My career got a few huge bumps along the way. I mean, bumps as we also had a bunch of bruises too, but bumps meaning like things that really moved me, got me airborne. And one of them was at a very young age, I was able to train the CEO of Verizon Global Networks.
Wow.
And it just happened that, that particular day, 5 layers of management couldn't solve a particular problem. I was invited to solve the problem. And next thing I knew, I was helping out in the C-suite, right? I was doing all sorts of training in technology, which turned into business. And over the years has evolved and evolved. And eventually I found myself at the US Supreme Court working with one of my personal heroes, which is Justice Ruth Ginsburg. And I got to just do all sorts of fun things over the years. And so along the way, I've also wanted to solve my own problems, which is where I started learning about becoming an author, which is why I love that you do this particular podcast to inspire and help others, because it really just, I have learned, I train for a living, right? And when people ask me all the time, they're like, how do you know so much? And I'm like, because I learn. Like all the time I learn from all the folks around me, and I happen to be surrounded by a lot of brilliant, amazing people. And Kim, you and I share, a lot of the same circle of friends, especially like up in Canada. And there's just so many amazing people to learn from. And so that's kind of my story is I became a really good teacher by learning a lot from the people that I was teaching.
And, I think that, when we talk about wealth and freedom, I think, one of the keys, and you're going to get into a lot more into it, but one of the keys for me has been the fact that I never stop learning and I never stop growing. And, the more I learn and grow, the more I realize that wealth and freedom are available for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So that is pretty awesome. And I like how you said that you got the bumps, but you got the bruises too. So maybe just share maybe one quick bruise, because sometimes we hear about people like you and we think, wow, but that could never happen to me. But you've had the bruises too, like life wasn't all the bumps.
There's a another thing that I can claim as an instructor is that I have a lot of real life experience failing at all aspects of life, right? So it's like, if I'm teaching you about relationships, well, trust me, because I have successfully completed 2 marriages and an engagement and a few other things. It's like, there's lessons to be learned, and also not taking those as, hey, that I'm down and out.
Yes.
Right? So in addition to like personal failures along the way, so I'll give you a big one that happened. This was back in 2006 or so, somewhere in that ballpark. I went over and actually rearranged my life to live in India to train call centers and how to sell back to Americans, right? To train call center management, to train the trainers so they knew how to train it. It was a very hot and popping industry at the time. And I thought, sure, I like training. Let me go over there. And I've never been to India. And I did that. Well, that entire project and every penny that I put into it was a complete bust. I came back to the United States, and what would be, commonly expressed as like my tail between my legs, right? It's like I felt like a horrible, horrible failure. And then took a salaried job with commission for like $70,000 to get started, and then sort of like started back up again. And that was okay. Right? Like that was okay. But looking back on it at the time, oh gosh, Kim, it felt like everybody knew, right? It felt like everybody, it felt like, no, like honestly, I thought all my friends, all my circle of entrepreneurs and business people and professionals in Washington, DC, they're going to think like, oh my God, this guy's such a loser, right? Yet I came back and what I received was actually the opposite. I found that my friends were proud of me, that I took a chance, that I moved myself to Asia, that I took on an industry that I hadn't been in before. They saw it as like, wow, that was actually an accomplishment. No one cared that I had lost the money. No one cared that I was starting back over. And I would say like that was the lesson that I keep learning over and over again, is that failure is just a normal part of the journey. And in the lesson learned is that you're not done. The only person who thinks you're done is you. And it's like, it sounds silly, but when you're in it, it feels the worst.
Yes.
But if you can just remember that you were the one who created your success in the first place, so you're the only one responsible. So don't worry about it. It's easier than
that. And I think there's so many lessons in failure that, I look back and I feel like, the first at least 10 years of being an entrepreneur, it was just fail. But, every time I failed, I learned something. And then it finally hit the point where I had learned enough that I wasn't failing. I was now succeeding because I had learned a lot of the lessons. So, wow, that's pretty cool. Now, I know you've come with some really good stuff, so I'm going to let you loose to share about your thoughts on wealth and freedom with the listeners today.
All right. Thank you. And so this is something that, gosh, it sort of irks me, because in social media and what we see is the definition of success and the definition of wealth is people driving around in extraordinarily expensive vehicles.
It doesn't work in Canada.
Very large homes.
I just said you could have the most expensive vehicle. You still don't drive it in Canada in the winter.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. So it's like, but there's this huge social movement, or I don't know if I'd call it a movement. Maybe it is, where it's on social media. There's this gigantic push for people to go and make money, become wealthy, make money. And they're doing it at the expense of actually their own happiness, their own sanity, their own spiritual awakening, their own abilities, their own desire to help others, right? They're just chasing money all day long, trying to achieve these extraordinary goals. So I want to share with you a different viewpoint, because I have been making money for quite some time. I was making 6 figures when I was 20 years old.
Wow.
And, timing was right. I was in the tech industry. I was in Washington, DC. I was all that stuff. And at the end of the day, what it comes down to is I've had some goodies in life. I've driven Mercedes, I've driven many, many, many luxury cars and lived in nice homes and all that other stuff. And eventually you learn about yourself, what's important to you.
Mm-hmm.
And for some people, those things are important. What I discovered for me is that living a life where I'm in a gigantic mansion by myself doesn't really seem interesting.
Mm.
If I wanted to stay at the mansion for a vacation, I could rent it for the night, right? There's Airbnb, there's all these services.
Yes.
I could rent it for the night, but owning that and using that as a measure of success just didn't ring true for me.
Mm.
The idea of going out boating, and I go boating all the time because I've got a boat down here in Florida. I joined a boat club and all this other stuff, right? But I don't have a big, gigantic yacht, and I don't invite a bunch of random girls in bikinis. And I go out boating because I really like boating. I love the water. I love taking my friends out. I love hanging out with the dolphins. I love going to private beaches because I live in Miami. So there's tons of beaches around, tons of private islands around. And during the week, everyone's at work except me. So I take a couple of friends out and we now have our own island for the day, right? So it's like, for me, what I find in joy and success and stuff is different than what is very commonly pushed out. And, and I invite you to examine, like, is that really what you want? Do you want to sit in a big empty house by yourself that's really nice? Or are there other things that are important, right? So I think that this is a good opportunity for us to actually examine some new definitions. I'm going to propose some new definitions. Is that okay, Kim?
Oh, that sounds awesome.
Okay, so this is some new definitions of being poor and being wealthy. Okay, being poor or being wealthy. So in the United States, we have a distinction as an investor called accredited investor. And we kind of use that as a benchmark, if you will, to distinguish the wealthy from everyone else, which from the viewpoint of the wealthy, everyone else is poor.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Oh, you're upper middle class, like yip-de-doo, no one cares, right? So let's just be straight about it. You're poor, fine, you're poor, it's okay. So let's examine what is poor and see how easy it would be to change that condition. So as a definition of poor, to be poor means that you have accepted only marginal improvements in your economic condition. Okay. You've accepted that in life, you will get no raise or get a marginal raise, meaning you get a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6% raise. You've accepted that in some areas of your life, like your net worth, you're going to go down and down and down and down and down, and you'll take Social Security or you'll take whatever government program, or you're reliant on your workplace, or you don't know what you're doing, right? So you've just accepted mediocrity. As a definition of wealthy, you have the ability to create, maintain, and expand any asset without consideration. Okay, so I'm going to explain that for a little bit because that's wildly different than the poor definition.
Yes.
So let's define for a moment an asset. An asset is something that you possess, right? You have, either you made it or you bought it or whatever it is. It's an asset that you possess that makes you money. Okay? So for most people, they consider that their biggest investment, their biggest asset is their personal home that they reside in, which makes them no money.
Yes.
So congratulations, your biggest asset is a dud. Okay? And this is why people aren't moving forward. People say, home ownership is not the answer. You got to understand a bit more of what's going on here. So an asset is anything that'll make you money. It could be a franchise. It could be, you have a business. You own intellectual property. You wrote a song. You have a band. You are an actor or director. But there's so many different ways. You have an ATM machine. There's a million different ways to have assets that make you money. Real estate. In real estate alone, we can get into a million different ways to do it.
Yeah.
So a wealthy person has the ability to create an asset. Okay, so think about this for a second. Imagine for a moment that Warren Buffett, right? Everyone knows who Warren Buffett is, the world's greatest investor. If Mr. Buffett were to lose all of his money today, $0, Okay? Like he's got nothing in his bank account. He lost his house in Omaha, his car, like he had the clothes off his back. He's just got like sweatpants on. That's it.
And a
Could
t-shirt.
Mr. Buffett, what was that? Now you're imagining Mr. Buffett in sweatpants, right? Eating his McDonald's sandwich. I love that guy. He's so amazing. Right? And could you imagine now that the very next day, or even the very next moment, the very next unit of time, Mr. Buffett could now create an asset, even though he had no money.
Yes.
Because ideas matter.
Yes.
And there are people out there with money to back ideas.
Yes.
So to think otherwise is actually ignorance of how economics work. You just don't know how things work, right? So you've got to be able to create it. Then you also be able to maintain it. That means you've got to have understanding around the financials of your accounting systems, your taxes. You know, if you don't like your lawyers, you're not on track for success. Right? If you don't like your accounting, you're not on track for success. Right?
Yes.
These are the things to embrace because this is part of the maintenance of your assets. And then to be able to expand it, to duplicate, to exponentially grow whatever it is that you're creating. So consider that a wealthy person has the ability to do that regardless of any consideration. That means regardless of economic consideration. Doesn't matter if there's a recession. Doesn't matter which political party is in power. Doesn't matter which country you live in, mostly.
Yes.
Right? But let's say there's some level of free commerce available to you. Who cares what everyone else is doing? Just because everyone else is failing doesn't mean the wealthy are. What's a misunderstanding for most people is that they only see, because they've got these binoculars on, they're looking far at the top of the food chain and they're looking at the ultimate billionaires and seeing that, oh, that's it. That's the lifestyle, right? Or people like Mr. Grant Cardone, who's an awesome entrepreneur, great speaker, great trader, is rising rapidly to billionaire status, has a private jet and great social media presence, and he's amazing. But you don't need that. That's for him. And he says it. He says, this is for me. Do what's right for you. Do what's true for you. But many people don't do that. They just see that, they see the flash, and they think that's what I need to do. Because what a lot of people don't realize is that when you live a life as a wealthy person, you get to vacation whenever you want. And guess when wealthy people vacation? When poor people don't. Because they don't want to hang around poor people. Plus, they don't have to wait in line, right? And it costs less. This is the other thing. Wealthy people spend less on life itself, right? It's much cheaper to be wealthy than it is to be poor, because being poor means you don't know how the system works. You don't know how to actually maximize your investments. Your dollar value is constantly going down, and you don't have assets that are making money for you. So of course, life is more expensive because you're stuck on, I can only holiday on these particular months because of the kids' school system. I can't afford to take more than X number of days off of work and So when it's cheap in Germany, like I took a trip to Germany, I stayed in a 4.5-star hotel, Kim, for $92 a night. One of the nights was free because I stayed so many nights in hotels. One of them was free. Like, okay. But it was a beautiful, luxurious hotel that if it was during peak season, it would be $400 a night. Right. So what I really, really, really want you to think about is that it is entirely possible to be wealthy because you can have assets. And one of the easiest, most amazing assets to create, because this really is a creation, is to create a book.
Yes.
Right? Like, oh my goodness, like, could you think of a more like accessible asset for people to create, Kim? You look at like, okay, you want to learn about real estate. Gosh, there's a lot of learning to do about real estate law, real estate taxes. It's amazing. Real estate's a great investment. There's commercial, there's residential, there's wholesaling, there's flipping, and you can do bird dogging and private personal lending. Holy moly, there's a lot to do. And I recommend you do all of it if you want to. But I haven't found anything as rewarding as becoming an author. Both financially as well as like emotionally, as fulfillment and satisfaction and my ability to help others. Like becoming an author has been just a huge, huge blessing in my life.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But just one other thing I wanted to mention, because I think sometimes people forget that there's different layers of wealth.
Yes.
Wealth isn't always just about money. Sometimes
Right.
it's about the relationships,
And I would
right?
say it's very rarely about the money. In fact, if
Yes.
you measure wealth just by money, you really don't understand what wealth is.
Yeah.
Because a truly wealthy person will lose all their money and they'll still be wealthy.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, so I absolutely agree with you. Like there's way more than just the money part of it.
Like for me, one of the things that I think it's just part of who I am, but part of the wealth of my life is the investments I've made in people. Not only my family, like people always compliment our family because we're so strong as a family unit. We're always together. We're doing things together. We love each other. We spend time together, and we've created that really strong family unit. But we've also brought other people in. We've adopted people in and made them part of the family. And one of the things I love to do is working with kids. And, working with kids is a long-term wealth strategy because sometimes you don't see the results until they're grown up, right? But, I think when we look at wealth too, I think it's what you invest into the world to make it a better place.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. In the people, in your communities, in the world, and in all of those things. And if we can just tie this back for a moment about failure,
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it's so easy. I think most of us can have a desire to help, a desire to
Mm-hmm.
do good in the world. And we do take a lot of good actions and we do a lot of good things. But then when we have that failure, we turn our attention on the failure and we forget about the good things that we did. We forget about all the people that love us and care about us, and
Yes.
we care about them because we get hung up on, oh shucks, this yucky thing happened in my life.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm one of the things I noticed about you since I first met you is you were always like super loving and warm,
Well,
right? You're just
you.
like a welcoming being, and anyone in your space is going to instantly notice that about you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
And yeah, I mean, that's a type of social currency. That's a type of wealth that's, especially when you lose the shirt off your back,
Mm-hmm.
it's not a problem, right? You got lots of friends that will love and support you. But they, and the thing is, like, when you have great friends,
Mm-hmm.
when you go through failure, they don't need to give you $1. All they need to do is remind you of who you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like when I think about like what my friends do for me help-wise,
Mm-hmm.
and what I get from my coaches and my mentors is just a reminder that, hey, who I am is the spirit. I'm not the body. Let's not confuse the driver for the car, right? Let's not confuse the driver for the racetrack or the race itself. And just that opportunity reset. It just makes such a huge difference.
Awesome.